December 14th, 1942, Buna, New Guinea. Private First Class Takeshi Yamamoto crouches behind a shattered palm trunk, his rifle slick with humidity, his stomach a hollow ache that has become as familiar as breathing. Around him, the jungle breathes steam rising from black mud, insects shrieking in waves. And somewhere in the green darkness ahead, the Americans are dug in. He can smell them. Cigarette smoke, something sweet he can't identify, and the acrid bite of their explosives. Takeshi's last meal was 16 hours ago. A fist-sized ball of rice, weevils and all, split between 3 men. Before that, nothing for a day and a half. The supply barges that were supposed to reach them never came. Somewhere between Rabaul and here, American submarines or aircraft sent them to the bottom. Now the entire company is living on what they carried, what they can scavenge, and what the jungle reluctantly provides. Captain Hideaki Saito moves through the undergrowth like a ghost, his once crisp uniform now a patchwork of tears and dark sweat stains. He's lost 20 pounds since landing in New Guinea 3 months ago. His officers, men who once dined on fish, pickled vegetables, and proper tea, now gnaw on palm hearts and boiled grass. Yesterday, Lieutenant Endo collapsed during a patrol. Heat exhaustion, the medic said, but everyone knew the truth. Starvation. They have fallen back, Captain Saito whispers, gesturing toward the American foxholes visible through the morning mist. We attack at dawn, take everything, ammunition, medical supplies, food, especially food. The word hangs in the air like a prayer. Takeshi has heard stories from soldiers who fought on Guadalcanal, men who stumbled into abandoned marine positions and found treasures beyond imagination, canned peaches, crackers that didn't crumble into dust, meat that wasn't rancid. One man swore he found chocolate, real chocolate, not the bitter ceremonial stuff officers sometimes carried. But Takeshi dismissed those stories as fever dreams, the hallucinations of men pushed too far. Now, as dawn breaks over the Buna coast, he's about to learn the truth. The attack comes fast and brutal. Mortar rounds shriek overhead, geysers of mud erupting across the American line. Takeshi sprints forward, his legs weak, his vision tunneling, but adrenaline drowning out the hunger. Machine gun fire rips through the palms, American, .30 caliber. He recognizes the sound. Men fall around him. Corporal Watanabe takes 3 rounds and crumples without a sound. But the Americans are retreating. Takeshi sees them pulling back through the trees, carrying their wounded, laying suppressing fire as they go. It's not a rout, it's tactical, controlled, professional. But they're leaving their positions, and in those positions, they're leaving things behind. Takeshi reaches the first foxhole, breathing hard, and nearly trips over a wooden crate. It's olive drab, stenciled with English letters, U.S. Army Field Ration K. His hands shake as he pries it open, splinters digging into his palms. Inside, wrapped in waxed cardboard, are 3 smaller boxes. He tears one open. A can of meat, a packet of biscuits, 4 cigarettes in a moisture-proof wrapper, powdered lemon juice, sugar tablets, chewing gum. And he stares, uncomprehending a small bar wrapped in brown paper. He peels it back, and the smell hits him like a physical blow. Chocolate. Takeshi! Sergeant Koji is shouting, waving frantically. Bring it! Bring everything! But Takeshi can't move. He's staring at the contents of this single box, this one soldier's ration for 1 day, and his mind is reeling. This is more food than he's seen in a week. More variety than his officers receive. He thinks of Captain Saito, boiling tree bark for tea. He thinks of Lieutenant Endo, unconscious in a medical tent with nothing but rice water in his belly. And this abundance is what the Americans consider field rations. Not special occasion food, not officer's mess. Standard supply for every soldier, every day. Around him, other soldiers are tearing through the American foxholes, finding crate after crate. Private Nakamura holds up a can of ham, tears streaming down his face. Corporal Ishida has torn open a chocolate bar with his teeth and is chewing mechanically, his expression caught between ecstasy and something darker, horror, maybe, or despair. How many of these do they have? Someone whispers. Captain Saito arrives, breathing hard, his sword still drawn. He sees the scattered rations, the treasure trove his starving men have discovered, and for a moment his iron composure cracks. He picks up one of the K-ration boxes, studies it with the careful attention of a scholar examining a sacred text. "They make this?" he says quietly. "For every soldier?" No one answers. The question doesn't need an answer. The evidence is overwhelming, undeniable, and terrifying in its implications. Because if America can afford to feed its frontline troops like this, if they can ship chocolate and cigarettes and coffee across thousands of miles of ocean, if they can package it in moisture-proof containers and distribute it to every foxhole on every godforsaken island in the Pacific, then what chance does Japan have? December 14th, 1942. Buna, New Guinea, 0847 hours. Captain Saito orders his men to collect every ration box, every can, every scrap of American supply they can carry. The squad moves through the abandoned positions like scavengers, but there's no joy in their faces, only a dawning, terrible understanding. Takeshi stuffs K-ration boxes into his pack until the seams strain. Beside him, Private Nakamura is trying to open a can of chopped ham and eggs with his bayonet, his hands trembling so badly he nearly cuts himself. When the lid finally peels back, the smell makes Takeshi's knees weak. Real meat. Preserved meat that hasn't spoiled in the tropical heat. Nakamura scoops it directly into his mouth with his fingers, not bothering with the small wooden spoon tucked inside the ration box. Slowly, Sergeant Koji warns, but his voice lacks conviction. He's clutching 3 cigarette packs, Lucky Strike, the wrapper says, and staring at them like holy relics. Your stomachs aren't used to rich food. You'll make yourselves sick. But hungry men don't listen to reason. Across the captured position, Japanese soldiers are tearing into the rations with desperate abandon. Private Sato vomits after eating half a chocolate bar too quickly, but immediately reaches for another. Corporal Ishida has found a tin of crackers and is methodically eating them one by one, his eyes distant, perhaps remembering what real food tastes like. Takeshi forces himself to eat slowly. He tries the biscuits first. They're hard, bland, but they don't crumble into powder like the hardtack in Japanese rations. Then the canned meat, pork and beans, the label says. It's salty, almost overwhelmingly so, but his body craves it. There's fat in it, protein, calories his starving frame desperately needs. And then there are the accessories, the little things that speak volumes. Matches in a waterproof case, toilet paper, can openers that actually work. Chewing gum. Why would soldiers need chewing gum? The wastefulness seems obscene until Takeshi realizes. Because they can. Because their supply chain is so robust, their industrial capacity so vast, that they can include luxuries in combat rations. Captain, Lieutenant Endo has emerged from the medical tent, pale and weak, but walking. He holds up a small packet. They have lemon powder. For scurvy. Mixed with water, it prevents disease. Captain Saito takes the packet, reads the English instructions printed on the back. His expression darkens. Our medical supplies ran out 3 weeks ago. Men are dying of preventable illness. And the Americans, they prevent scurvy with their daily rations. The implication settles over the group like ash after a bombing. This isn't just about food. This is about logistics, infrastructure. The ability to manufacture millions of these boxes, package them, ship them across the world's largest ocean, and distribute them to individual soldiers in isolated jungle positions. Japan can barely keep its troops supplied with rice and ammunition. America is shipping chocolate bars and cigarettes to the front lines. Sergeant Koji lights one of the captured Lucky Strikes, inhales deeply, and closes his eyes. I haven't had tobacco in 6 weeks, he says. Our rations included cigarettes when we left Rabaul, but they ran out before we even reached shore. These Americans, they get 4 cigarettes per day. Per day. How do they do it? Private Nakamura asks, his voice small. How do they make so much? Takeshi knows the answer, though speaking, it feels like treason. He's seen the intelligence reports, the ones officers whispered about but never discussed openly. America's industrial capacity is 10 times, some say 20 times, that of Japan. They have factories that can produce more steel in a week than Japan manufactures in a month. They have cargo ships being built faster than submarines can sink them. And they have something Japan desperately lacks: abundant natural resources, secure supply lines, and a homeland that has never felt the terror of enemy bombers overhead. Captain Saito seems to be wrestling with the same thoughts. He sits heavily on the edge of a foxhole, still holding the K-Ration box, and for the first time since Takeshi met him, the captain looks old, defeated. "When I was at Staff College," Saito says quietly, "they taught us that Japanese soldiers possess spiritual strength that Americans lack, that our dedication, our willingness to sacrifice, would overcome any material disadvantage." He gestures at the scattered rations. "But how do you fight an enemy who can afford to be generous? Who feeds his soldiers better than we feed our officers?" No one has an answer. Takeshi opens another component of the K-Ration, the dinner unit, according to the label. Inside he finds a can of processed cheese, more crackers, a bar of something called tropical chocolate, designed not to melt, and powdered orange juice concentrate. There's also a small packet of sugar and a stick of chewing gum. The attention to detail is staggering. Someone, somewhere, in America, designed this. Engineers calculated caloric needs, nutritionists balanced vitamins, factories produced millions of identical packages, and the military shipped them across the Pacific without fail. Meanwhile, Takeshi's own rations for the past month have been whatever the quartermaster could scrounge: weevil-infested rice, dried fish so old it had turned to powder, and occasionally a taste of pickled radish, if they were lucky. Officers received slightly better portions, but not by much. Everyone was starving together, in a kind of desperate equality. But the Americans weren't starving. The Americans were eating 3 balanced meals a day, with coffee and cigarettes and chocolate for morale, and they were still winning. "Gather the rations," Captain Saito orders, standing abruptly. "Everything. We take them back to headquarters. Command needs to see this." He pauses, looking at his men gaunt, hollow-eyed, their uniforms hanging loose on wasted frames. "And each man may keep 1 day's worth for himself. You've earned it." The permission feels both like a gift and an admission of failure. As Takeshi carefully selects 3 K-Ration boxes to keep breakfast, dinner, and supper, he catches sight of Corporal Ishida. The corporal is holding an empty chocolate wrapper, smoothing it out with careful fingers, reading the English words printed on it. Hershey's Tropical Bar. U.S. Army. "What are you doing?" Takeshi asks. Ishida looks up, and there are tears in his eyes. "I'm going to keep this. When we lose this war, and we will lose, Takeshi, make no mistake, I want to remember this moment. The moment I understood we never had a chance." January 23rd, 1943. Rabaul, New Britain. Word travels fast in a starving army. By the time Captain Saito's company withdraws from Buna, what's left of it, anyway? They lost 43 men in the retreat. Stories about American rations have spread through the Japanese forces like wildfire. At Rabaul's overcrowded headquarters, officers crowd around the captured K-Ration boxes that Saito laid out on a bamboo table like evidence at a trial. Colonel Masao Yoshida, commander of the 144th Infantry Regiment, picks up a tin of Spam with the careful reverence of a man handling an unexploded bomb. He's lost weight too, they all have, but his uniform is still pressed, his bearing still rigid. That's what separates officers from enlisted men. The illusion of dignity, maintained, even as they slowly starve. "This is what their infantry carries?" Yoshida asks. His voice is carefully neutral, but Takeshi, standing at attention against the wall with the other witnesses, can hear the strain beneath it. "Yes, sir," Captain Saito replies. "Standard issue. We found dozens of cases. Each American soldier receives 3 units per day: breakfast, dinner, and supper. The variety rotates, but the caloric content remains consistent, approximately 3,000 calories daily." A major from the logistics corps steps forward, calculator in hand. 3,000 calories? Our current ration allocation is 1,800 calories, and we're only achieving 60% distribution. Most frontline units are receiving less than 1,100 calories per day. The silence that follows is damning. Colonel Yoshida sets down the Spam and picks up the small accessory packet matches, gum, cigarettes, toilet paper, and these luxuries. They include these in combat rations? Every box, sir. Why? The question isn't rhetorical. Yoshida genuinely seems baffled by the concept. What tactical advantage does chewing gum provide? Captain Saito hesitates, then speaks carefully. I believe, sir, that it's a matter of morale. The Americans don't just feed their soldiers, they comfort them. They remind them of home. Each ration includes familiar brands, familiar tastes. It tells their men, you are valuable. Your well-being matters. Your country has not forgotten you. The implication hangs in the air, unspoken but understood by everyone in the room. And what does Japan tell its soldiers? That suffering is noble? That starvation builds character? That dying for the emperor is the highest honor? So why waste resources keeping you comfortable? Takeshi watches Colonel Yoshida's face carefully. The colonel is a career officer, a man who's internalized decades of military doctrine about Japanese spiritual superiority. But he's also pragmatic enough to understand what these rations represent. Not just food, but a fundamental difference in how each nation views its soldiers as assets to be maintained, or as expendable resources to be consumed. There's more, sir. Captain Saito continues. He produces a small booklet, water-stained, but legible. We found these in several positions. Training manuals. They describe proper nutrition, warning signs of malnutrition, and procedures for reporting inadequate rations. He pauses. American soldiers are encouraged actually to report if they're not receiving enough food. A bitter laugh escapes from somewhere in the assembled officers. The idea of a Japanese soldier complaining about rations is absurd. You eat what you're given. You thank your officers for the privilege. You don't complain, even as your body consumes itself. Major Tanaka from Intelligence speaks up. We've been monitoring American supply operations. In the past 6 months, they've landed over 400,000 tons of supplies in the South Pacific. That's not just food. It's ammunition, fuel, construction equipment, medical supplies. Their Liberty ships are being produced at a rate of 3 per day. 3 ships. Every day. 3 ships per day. Takeshi does the mental calculation. That's over 1,000 ships per year. Japan's entire merchant marine, before the war, was less than 6 million tons. America is building capacity that exceeds that in months, not years. They're not just fighting us, Major Tanaka continues quietly. They're fighting Germany in Europe, North Africa, and the Atlantic. They're supplying Britain, Russia, China, and they're still outproducing us in every theater simultaneously. Colonel Yoshida's jaw tightens. Your point, Major? My point, sir, is that these rations aren't an anomaly. They're a symbol. Every K-ration box represents an industrial and logistical system we cannot match. We're not fighting American soldiers, we're fighting American factories. And the factories are winning. The room falls silent. Outside, Takeshi can hear the distant rumble of aircraft. American B-17 seconds, probably heading north to bomb Japanese positions. They come every few days now, flying so high that anti-aircraft fire can't reach them, dropping their payloads with impunity. And every bomb, every bullet, every gallon of fuel represents that same overwhelming industrial supremacy. What do the men say? Yoshida asks suddenly, looking directly at Takeshi. You, Private. What do the soldiers think about these American rations? Takeshi stiffens. Speaking honestly could be considered defeatist, even treasonous. But lying to a colonel is equally dangerous. He chooses his words carefully. Sir, The men are troubled. We've been told that American soldiers are soft, undisciplined, weak from luxury. But these rations suggest a different story. An enemy who can afford to feed his soldiers chocolate in the middle of a jungle war is not weak. He's powerful. Dangerously powerful. Matey 10. Dangerously powerful. Yoshida nods slowly. And morale? How does this knowledge affect fighting spirit? This is the dangerous question. Takeshi thinks of Corporal Ishida, carefully preserving that chocolate wrapper like a prophet's warning. He thinks of Private Sato, who broke down crying after tasting real meat for the first time in 3 months. He thinks of his own growing certainty that this war, this impossible war against an enemy that can ship cigarettes and chewing gum across an ocean while Japan struggles to deliver rice, is already lost. Sir, Takeshi says carefully, the men will fight. We will obey orders and fulfill our duty to the Emperor. But we are not blind. We see what we're facing. Colonel Yoshida's expression is unreadable. He looks down at the K-ration boxes, at the evidence of American abundance spread across the table, and for a moment, he seems to sag. Then his spine straightens, his mask of command returning. Very well, Captain Saito. Your report will be forwarded to Southern Army headquarters. The rest of you are dismissed, and I trust that none of what was discussed here will leave this room. Defeatist talk is dangerous to morale. Is that understood? A chorus of yes, sir echoes through the room. But as Takeshi files out with the others, he knows the truth. It's too late for information control. The knowledge is spreading. Every Japanese soldier who captures an American position, every prisoner who's fed by his captors, every scout who watches supply convoys unload their impossible abundance. They all carry the same message back to their units. The enemy is strong, stronger than we were told. Strong enough to feed his soldiers chocolate while we starve. And in the barracks that night, as Takeshi shares his remaining K-ration crackers with his squad mates, he hears the whispers spreading through the darkness. Questions that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Can we really win this war? What happens when we run out of food completely? If their soldiers eat this well, what must their homeland be like? No one has answers. But everyone, from private to colonel, is beginning to understand the same terrible truth. They're not fighting a war they can win through courage or sacrifice. They're fighting a war of production, of logistics, of industrial might. And Japan is losing that war with every K-ration box the Americans distribute to their troops. March 17th, 1943. Guadalcanal, Japanese evacuation zone. Sergeant Koji hasn't eaten in 4 days. Not properly, anyway. There was a handful of rice 3 days ago, shared between 5 men. Yesterday, he chewed on tree bark and tried to convince himself it was nourishment. This morning, he watched Private Sato die not from bullets or bombs, but from simple starvation. The boy was 19 years old. His body had consumed itself from the inside out, until there was nothing left. They call Guadalcanal Starvation Island now. The official name, the one Tokyo uses, is Gatu, the strategic withdrawal. But the soldiers know better. They're not withdrawing. They're fleeing, sneaking away in the night while American destroyers patrol the coast, evacuating what's left of an army that was supposed to reclaim the island and crush the American Marines. Instead, the island crushed them. Koji sits in a bunker carved into volcanic soil, waiting for nightfall and the destroyer that may or may not come to rescue them. Around him, the remnants of his platoon huddle in silence. They're too weak to talk, too weak to do much, except exist, moment by moment, waiting for either salvation or death. Lieutenant Endo is here too, though calling him lieutenant feels like a formality. His uniform is rags. His sword is gone, traded to a Navy ensign for 3 sweet potatoes 2 weeks ago. He stares at the bunker wall with hollow eyes, occasionally muttering to himself. Koji thinks the lieutenant has given up. Not on life, necessarily, but on the pretense that any of this matters. "Do you remember the rations?" Endo asks suddenly, his voice a croak. Koji doesn't need to ask which rations. Every day. "I dream about them." Endo's laugh is brittle, broken. "Not about home. Not about my family. I dream about American chocolate bars. About canned ham. About cigarettes that don't taste like mold." He turns to look at Koji, and there's something desperate in his gaze. What does that make me? What kind of Japanese soldier dreams about enemy rations? "A hungry one," Koji replies. There's no judgment in his voice. They're past judgment, past pride. They're animals now, reduced to the most basic drive: survive. Through the bunker entrance, Koji can see the American positions across the valley. Even from here, even in daylight, he can smell their cooking. Real cooking. They have field kitchens, actual mobile kitchens with stoves and cooks and hot meals. The wind carries the scent of frying meat, of baking bread, of coffee. Coffee. Koji hasn't tasted coffee since leaving Japan 9 months ago. The Americans drink it 3 times a day. He's seen their trash pits, overflowing with empty tins and wrappers and cigarette butts. Such waste. Such impossible, abundant waste. "I talked to a Navy pilot last week," Private Nakamura says quietly. He's the youngest survivor of their original squad, barely 18. Before he flew out, he said he bombed an American supply depot on Espiritu Santo. Said there were mountains of crates. Mountains. Food stacked higher than houses. And that was just one depot, on one island. "Shut up," someone mutters. "You'll make it worse." But Nakamura continues, his voice taking on a dreamlike quality. He said the Americans are building ice cream factories. On their bases, factories to make ice cream. While we're eating grass and dying of beriberi, they're making ice cream. Koji wants to call it a lie. Propaganda. Impossible. But he knows it's true. He's seen enough evidence of American abundance to believe anything now. Ice cream factories. Why not? If they can ship chocolate to jungle foxholes, if they can include chewing gum in combat rations, if they can afford to be so generous with their frontline troops, then ice cream factories are perfectly logical. "My brother was in China," Lieutenant Endo says, still staring at the wall. "He wrote to me before I shipped out, said the Chinese were starving, but at least we controlled the supply lines. At least we could feed our soldiers, even if the locals suffered." He laughs again, that broken sound. "Now we're the ones starving. Now we're the ones eating tree bark while the enemy feasts." Koji thinks about his own rations, the official ones, the ones Tokyo claims every soldier receives. On paper, the daily Japanese field ration includes 850 grams of rice, 200 grams of meat or fish, pickled vegetables, miso, salt, and tea. It's adequate. Not generous, but adequate for a soldier's needs. In reality, Koji hasn't seen meat in 3 months. The rice, when it comes, is moldy and infested. The vegetables are long gone. They're supposed to receive resupply by submarine and fast destroyer runs the Tokyo Express. The Americans call it mockingly, but most supply ships never make it. American aircraft sink them in daylight. American destroyers hunt them at night. The submarines that survive deliver ammunition and replacement troops, not food. Food is too bulky, too heavy. Better to send bullets and hope the soldiers can forage. But there's nothing left to forage. The jungle has been picked clean. Every edible plant, every palm, heart, every root has been consumed. Some men have started eating grass, which provides no nutrition and tangles in their intestines. Others have turned to more desperate measures. Koji has heard rumors of cannibalism on other parts of the island, though he refuses to believe them. Refuses to think about what hunger can drive men to do. "You know what the worst part is?" Endo asks suddenly. "It's not the hunger. It's the knowing. Knowing that our own officers eat better than we do. Knowing that headquarters on Rabaul still has sake and fish while we starve. Knowing that the Americans feed their private soldiers better than we feed our colonels. It's true, and it's a truth that's been poisoning morale for months. The Japanese military's rigid hierarchy means that officers receive better rations, better medical care, better everything. It's supposed to reflect their superior status, their greater responsibility. But when everyone is starving, those distinctions become obscene. Koji remembers Captain Saito, back at Buna, holding that K-Ration box and realizing that American privates ate better than Japanese officers. The captain had looked broken by that knowledge. What must it be like for generals and colonels, sitting in rear headquarters, to know that their equivalent ranks in the American military have access to resources they can only dream of? The destroyer comes tonight, Koji says, because someone needs to change the subject before Endo spirals completely. We just have to hold on until nightfall. Then we're off this cursed island. To where? Nakamura asks. Rabaul? The food situation there is barely better. I heard they're on half rations already. Better than no rations. Is it? The question comes from Corporal Ishida, who's been silent until now. He's still carrying that chocolate wrapper. Koji notices. Still preserving it like a talisman. Is it better to slowly starve on another island, waiting for another evacuation? How many times can we run before there's nowhere left to run to? It's a fair question. The Americans are advancing on multiple fronts. New Georgia, Bougainville, the Gilbert Islands. Every week brings news of another Japanese position under siege, another island bypassed and left to starve, another garrison writing final letters home before launching doomed banzai charges. And behind every American advance, there's that same overwhelming logistical machine, the Liberty ships, the cargo planes, the supply depots piled high with food and ammunition and fuel. The K-Rations distributed without thought of shortage or scarcity. Koji closes his eyes and allows himself a moment of fantasy. He imagines being an American soldier, having 3 meals a day, every day, without fail, having cigarettes and chocolate and coffee, having medical care that includes morphine and antibiotics instead of prayer and endurance, having boots that don't fall apart, uniforms that aren't rotten with mildew, equipment that actually functions. He imagines fighting for a country so wealthy, so powerful, that it can afford to treat its soldiers like valued assets rather than expendable ammunition. The fantasy hurts worse than hunger. August 9th, 1945. Rabaul, New Britain. Takeshi Yamamoto is still alive. This surprises him more than anything else that's happened in the war. He survived Buna. He survived Guadalcanal's evacuation. He survived 2 years of island-hopping retreats, of starvation sieges, of watching better men die from hunger and disease, while he somehow persisted. Now he sits in a bunker at Rabaul, bypassed, isolated, forgotten by both sides, waiting for a war to end. The supplies stopped coming months ago. Rabaul's garrison of 90,000 men has been cut off, deemed not worth the American effort to assault. They'll just sit here, slowly starving, while the war moves on without them. It's a mercy, in a way. Better to die slowly of hunger than quickly under a flamethrower on some beach. Takeshi is 24 years old. He looks 50. His teeth are loose from scurvy. His vision blurs at the edges from malnutrition. He weighs perhaps 90 pounds, down from the 140 he carried when he enlisted in 1941. That man, that eager, proud young soldier who believed in divine destiny and spiritual superiority, is gone. Starved away, year by year, calorie by calorie. In his pocket, wrapped carefully in oilcloth, he carries Corporal Ishida's chocolate wrapper. Ishida died on New Georgia, shot through the chest while charging an American machine gun nest. Before he died, he pressed the wrapper into Takeshi's hand. "Remember," Ishida had whispered. "Remember what we learned." Takeshi remembers. The bunker radio crackles to life. It still works, miraculously, though they have no power to transmit, only to receive. A voice cuts through the static, speaking Japanese, but with a strange, hollow quality. It takes Takeshi a moment to recognize it. A recording. The Emperor's voice. Other soldiers are gathering now, drawn by the unprecedented sound. The Emperor never speaks directly to the people. Never. This alone tells them something momentous is happening. The speech is formal, filled with classical phrases that Takeshi's weakened mind struggles to parse. But the meaning gradually becomes clear. Japan is surrendering. The war is over. They have lost. The silence that follows is profound. No one weeps. No one rages. They're too tired, too hollow, too starved for dramatic emotion. They simply sit in the darkness, processing the information. 4 years of war, millions dead. Cities burned. And for what? We lost, Lieutenant Endo says quietly. He's still alive too, though barely. Still technically an officer, though rank means nothing now. We actually lost. We lost the moment the war started, Takeshi hears himself say. The words would have been treason 3 years ago. Now they're just obvious. We lost the moment we attacked an enemy who could afford to ship chocolate bars to jungle foxholes. Endo looks at him, and something like understanding passes between them. They're thinking of the same thing. Those K-Ration boxes at Buna. That moment of revelation when they understood the true nature of their enemy. Do you know what the Americans did? Private Nakamura asks. He's gotten news somehow. There are rumors that American planes have been dropping leaflets, offering surrender instructions. After they took Saipan, they found Japanese civilians who'd been told Americans would torture and kill them. They were so terrified they jumped off cliffs. Mothers threw their children into the sea. And? Someone asks. And Affidity? And the Americans who watched it were horrified. They tried to stop it, tried to save people. After the battle, they set up field hospitals, fed the survivors. The civilians couldn't believe it. They expected monsters, and found. He trails off, searching for the word. Supply officers, Takeshi finishes. They found an army that has enough food to feed not just their own soldiers, but their enemies too. It's the final, damning lesson of the war. American forces don't just defeat Japanese troops, they feed them. Prisoners of war in American camps receive more calories than Japanese soldiers on active duty received at the war's peak. It's not cruelty or calculation. It's simply that America's logistical baseline is so high that even their prisoners eat better than Japan's officers. Sergeant Koji, gaunt as a skeleton, manages a hollow laugh. Remember how they told us Americans were weak, soft from luxury and decadence? They were soft, Endo says. But it turns out you can be soft and still win. You can feed your soldiers chocolate and still crush your enemies. All those lectures about spiritual strength, about Bushido, about Japanese superiority. He shakes his head. It meant nothing. Spirit doesn't stop bullets. Honor doesn't fill empty stomachs. We believed we could win through sacrifice. And all we did was sacrifice ourselves for nothing. Takeshi thinks about Captain Saito, who died on New Georgia. He thinks about the thousands, millions of Japanese soldiers who died, believing their suffering had meaning, that their hunger built character, that deprivation made them stronger. And he thinks about American soldiers, well-fed and well-supplied, who fought just as bravely without needing to starve first. What happens now? Nakamura asks. Now? Endo closes his eyes. Now the Americans come here. They take our surrender. And they probably feed us. Because that's what they do. They win. And then they feed everyone. It sounds like a joke, but no one's laughing. It's too accurate. Too bitter. They've spent 4 years fighting an enemy who had already won before the first shot was fired. Not because American soldiers were braver or more skilled, though many were, but because America's farms and factories and supply ships made Japanese victory impossible. You can't beat an enemy who treats chocolate bars as standard ration items. You can't outlast a nation that builds 3 cargo ships per day. You can't win a war of attrition against an opponent whose logistics are so robust that they include morale-boosting luxuries in frontline combat rations. Japan had spirit. Japan had courage. Japan had soldiers willing to die for their emperor. America had K-Rations. And K-Rations won. Takeshi pulls out the chocolate wrapper, unfolds it carefully. The English words are faded now, but still legible. Hershey's Tropical Bar. U.S. Army. He runs his finger over the letters, thinking about everything that wrapper represents. The factories, the shipping, the careful engineering that created chocolate designed not to melt in tropical heat, the casual abundance of a nation that could afford such things. When we get home, Takeshi says quietly, if we get home, someone should remember this. Someone should teach the lesson we learned. What lesson? Koji asks. That wars aren't won by the soldiers who suffer most. They're won by the nations that take care of their soldiers best, that feed them, that value them enough to send them chocolate in the jungle. He holds up the wrapper. This is what defeat looks like. Not a bomb or a bullet, but a ration box. This is what we were really fighting. And we never had a chance. The others nod slowly. They understand. They've lived it. Outside, the sun is setting over Rabal's harbor, turning the water golden. Soon, American ships will arrive. American soldiers will march ashore. And Japanese troops will surrender, half-starved and hollow-eyed, to an enemy who will probably hand them their first decent meal in months. It's the final indignity. The ultimate lesson. They lost to an army that could afford to be merciful, that had so much abundance, such overwhelming logistical superiority, that they could feed their enemies without weakening themselves. Takeshi folds the chocolate wrapper carefully, tucks it back into his pocket. He'll keep it. A reminder, a lesson, a warning for anyone foolish enough to forget what this war taught. You cannot win against an enemy who eats better than your officers. You cannot defeat a nation whose industrial might is so vast that chocolate bars become military equipment. You cannot outlast an opponent whose idea of field rations would be considered a feast by your starving troops. Japan learned that lesson the hard way. Learned it in jungle foxholes and starving garrisons and forgotten island sieges. Learned it every time a Japanese soldier captured American supplies and realized with sinking horror just how outmatched they truly were. The war is over. Japan has lost. And somewhere in America, factories are still making K-Rations, preparing for the next war, whenever it might come, making sure their soldiers never go hungry, making sure they're valued, cared for, supplied, making sure they win. The contrast between Japanese and American military logistics during World War II remains one of the most striking factors in the Pacific Theater's outcome. While Japanese troops often operated on fewer than 1,000 calories per day by war's end, American soldiers maintained a minimum of 3,000 to 4,000 calories daily. This disparity reflected not just different logistical capabilities, but fundamentally different philosophies about the value of individual soldiers. The K-ration, designed by physiologist Ansel Keys in 1941, became an unexpected symbol of American industrial might, a reminder that wars are won not just on battlefields, but in factories, on farms, and aboard cargo ships that sail without fear of sinking.